Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie or Steph, and I'm so excited to kick off the Open Water webinar series and cover one of my favorite topics, which is job searching. Quick intro, I have about 25 years of experience underneath the recruiting umbrella. I've worn just about every hat imaginable. I've worked for public companies as large as Microsoft. I've worked for private startups as small as 6 people. And most recently, I've been consulting for high growth companies, as Chris mentioned, in the tech space. And as he also mentioned, I do run my own recruiting consulting firm, but I'm proud to be a principal member of Growth by Design Talent. Our founders are incredible. They've led talent at companies like Pinterest and Airbnb. So they understand what works not just in theory, but also in practice. And I've also been a candidate myself many times. Believe it or not, recruiters get nervous about interviewing. So my hope is to provide you some insights and tools that will help you approach your job search with confidence, as well as hopefully increase your odds that you land your dream job.
Awesome. And I will tell you this, like I've done a lot of chats with people and rarely have I come across someone who has been as prepared as Stephanie is for today. She has a whole document lined up with all kinds of great topics that are really great. So I really appreciate you doing this today, Stephanie. Before we get into sort of the tactics, I want to talk about sort of this weird, you called it a roller coaster of a job market right now, right? Like on the one hand, it's jobs growth in January exceeded everybody's expectations and the economy is doing amazing. And then, especially in the tech sector, you see Microsoft laying off thousands of people. You know, it was the year of efficiency last year for Meta, so they shed a lot of jobs. Unity, right? You keep hearing all of these places that are laying off people. So it's this weird, like, best of times and worst of times at the same time. Can you give us your perspective from the recruiter side? Like, what are you
Yeah.
seeing in the job market?
Yeah. Wow. Roller coaster indeed. So let's rewind back to 2020, right around the time that COVID hit and we were all thrust suddenly into this work from home environment. A lot of companies panicked, understandably, and there were some pretty big layoffs. And after about 3 or 4 months of working from home, when companies realized, like, wow, we can actually still hit our numbers and our bottom line, we're surviving this pandemic, they realized that they had perhaps laid off too many people and overcorrected for it back in 2021. So 2021 was known, I guess, in recruiter speak as the Great Resignation, because people were fleeing their jobs left and right for something shinier, maybe a higher salary, maybe that dream title they wanted, their dream company. And things were going swimmingly through early 2022, when all of a sudden the world tended to, I don't want to say implode, but we had a handful of hits. I mean, there was the Silicon Valley Bank crisis, which I think sent a lot of startups into panic, just wondering, like, is my funding secure? Later, we had the war with Ukraine, and then in 2023, we have the war going on in the Middle East. So all of these factors are impacting the market. And all of these great people that were hired back in 2021, all of a sudden are, sort of circling the drain with their job. And we've been seeing in the press mass layoffs at a lot of the big FANG companies like Google, Meta, et cetera. But we've also seen hits at smaller companies as well. So overall, it's just been back and forth. Like you said, Chris, we've seen the market pick up here or there. It happened a little bit over the summer and then it's happening now. But our crystal ball still hasn't quite told us when things will stabilize.
Have you been hearing anything? So let me ask you this. Do you work more on like the client side or the corporate side? Where in your Haystack search, like are companies coming to you and saying, hey, we need to find people? Are people coming
Yeah.
to you? Like,
So
how does that operate?
yeah. So I would say like 2021 of my 24 years of experience has been in-house, representing one company. The last 3.5 years I've been consulting, representing clients.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to ask you, so that's some good level setting, right? Because it can feel just very back and forth. And so what I think it's really good, you and I were talking about this in our pre-call, is for people to just know that they're not alone right now, right? Like, what's sort of the first thing when people are out? I mean, give me a general sense of just what people, just helping people understand that this is a global kind of thing right now, right? Like whether they are in need of a job, they just got laid off, or they're looking to switch, like there's just some general like things to feel right away, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I've found that it's hard to, I haven't spoken to one person in my own network that hasn't either been impacted by a layoff, or has a close friend or family member that's recently been laid off, or maybe is a manager and had to let go of most of their team. So I think we're all feeling it. There's a little bit of angst in the air, but the reason why we're so excited about this webinar is there still are jobs, and we're seeing it. So I'm seeing it in my business. I'm seeing it through Growth by Design Talent. Companies are still hiring. More thoughtfully, we'll say one of our partners at Growth by Design led a short video talk on sort of how companies are doing less with more, or sorry, more with less. So less resources that are owning more responsibilities, yet still hiring for very strategic roles. So there are jobs out there, and we want to give you the tools to find a job and not be afraid to hit the market. And I'll be honest, even seeing what I've witnessed over the last year, I've been hesitant as well to go out and get new business. But the fact is, like, there are still a lot of companies looking for great people.
Yeah, and
And
I
I
think
would
that there's
say,
oh, I'm sorry.
oh, no, please go ahead.
Well, I think that there's also an added dimension, right? Where especially for the audience that open water, open water is built for people with decades of experience, right? And so I think that when you have decades of experience, whether that was with one company or, across different companies, that adds sort of a wrinkle to it where you're
Yeah.
established, right? And so do you have some general advice for people who maybe are at a later stage in their career and suddenly find themselves either wanting or needing to look for a new opportunity?
Yeah, it almost feels like another elephant in the room. And when I say that, I mean age. Something I hear all the time from candidates, let's say over 30, is that they're too far in their own career to try something new. Or, let's say they've been at the same company or in the same role for 10 years and they feel like it's impossible to switch roles or switch companies. And I'm here to tell you that people switch careers and roles at any stage of life. And so I have a couple of examples to share with you. These are some famous examples that you may or may not have already heard about. Julia Childs, the famous chef, she was a spy in the CIA before becoming a famous chef, being on TV. Ronald Reagan was an actor before becoming America's 40th president at age 69. And Vera Wang, the fashion designer, was a figure skater and journalist before starting her fashion career at age 40. So these are just a couple of many famous examples. And then I have tons of examples from my personal network. Two that come to mind, I guess, immediately. One of them is a friend that was previously a 911 dispatcher and learned a lot about the law and legalities of first responders, and decided that he was going to pivot and become a lawyer. So at age 42, enrolled in law school, recognizing it was a 4-year program and he probably wouldn't actually be a lawyer until his late 40s, but was excited to be a lawyer for the remainder of his career and has never looked back. Another colleague of mine had 20 years of accounting experience, and in her last startup realized that she liked the mechanics of hiring people and the dynamics of human resources, and is now running people for her startup. So it's again, I want to stress that it's never too late. And although the pointers that we'll share today are geared towards the open water audience, as Chris mentioned, people with decades of experience, it's applicable across all levels of experience. So whether you have 5 years or 25 years, hopefully you'll learn something new or helpful today.
Oh, they are going to learn something new. Oh, they are going to get it. And let's get into it because, you had talked earlier about, from your side, you're seeing hope, but hope is not a strategy, as we have learned and been told, right? So you got to be prepared. So let's help people get prepared. So let's say people suddenly find themselves in a situation, or maybe it's been around for a while, right? Like where they need to find a new job or a new way of looking at work. What are kinds of the things at very first, what are the first things people should do?
Yeah. Well, first things first, don't panic. you're already taking the right steps because you're on this webinar. We know that you're resourceful and we know that you have the skills to navigate your search. I know for many people, your first reaction might be to just start blowing up your network, blowing up the phone lines, applying to every single job that's posted. But if you can swing it financially, I strongly recommend taking a beat, maybe 2 weeks off, 2 months off, if you can swing it. Process your emotions, lean on friends and family to regain the confidence that you need to best represent yourself to employers. I know this feels counterintuitive because it's scary. Let's say you've been in the same job for 3 years, 10 years, and all of a sudden now you're on the market and you need to find a new job now. But if you jump in too soon, you risk landing an interview with your dream job because a lot of candidates blow their interviews out of nerves or lack of preparation. I can tell you from personal experience that layoffs can be emotionally taxing. Perhaps you viewed your last team as family, or you associated your identity with the product or company that you worked for. And the shell shock lasts longer than you might predict. So taking a 2 week break, or in many cases, a couple of months, can give you the right amount of time to mentally prepare, as well as get materials to crush the interview. And I know that a lot of candidates, when they're thrust into the layoff situation and they're currently on the market, they know that they might not want to stay in the current role that they were doing, but they don't know what they want to do next. And this might be an indicator that you're not ready to start actively interviewing. I want to stress now that recruiters and employers prioritize candidates who are intentional. So going into an interview and bouncing off ideas with a recruiter on what you want to do next isn't the right forum. You want to do this with your personal network and friends and family first. And then you want to go into an interview confident that you want this role more than anything, and you want this company more than anything. There are a lot of great career coaching books out there. A couple of popular ones are Who Moved My Cheese? Or you've probably heard of What Color is Your Parachute? So if you find that you're not getting what you need out of discussing potential options with friends, family, your network, I recommend maybe buying a book or two and reading into it. There's also a lot of great career coaching networks out there. I also love career coaching. So because I'm part of the OpenWater network now, I volunteer myself. If you ever need help, feel free to hit me up.
Oh, we're gonna go into that. You know, we'll make great use of your skills and talents. I want to ask a quick question on like recruiters, just in general, right? Like, are recruiters? I've always felt that recruiters are people who would reach out to me. And
Mm-hmm.
is that true? Like, how should people view recruiters? Would one person ever reach out to a recruiter and say, "Hey, I'm looking for something," or is that something that's only going to be sort of outbound from your perspective, inbound from mine?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it depends on the type of recruiter. So there's what we call in-house recruiters that work for a company. They're employed by a company. So let's say, my first job was working at Microsoft. Microsoft was my employer, and my customer was Microsoft. So first and foremost came Microsoft, and then the candidate. And then there are agency recruiters that represent, let's say, a recruiting firm, and they might represent many companies. So maybe, they work with 50 different clients, and first their first client, I guess they're sort of split half and half with the company that's paying them to find a job, but also the candidate. And so they might be a little bit more proactive in reaching out and building sort of a book of candidates for all of the roles that they service. But regardless, I will say that it depends on the role too. So there are some roles that attract a lot of direct applicants. We find the non-technical roles, so let's say like marketing, sales, finance, even people positions. If those jobs are posted for a company, a lot of folks tend to apply, and recruiters don't need to do as much active reach out. Where on the technical side, with software engineers, maybe even technical product managers, these folks aren't always actively on LinkedIn, or tend to stay in their jobs a little bit longer. And so we might proactively tap you on the shoulder. And I think a third factor is the market. So referencing back to the Great Resignation in 2021, when companies couldn't hire fast enough, you might have found that more recruiters were reaching out to you, whether they were in-house or with an agency. Whereas in this market, when companies are doing more with less, it's less about actively reaching out and more about scouring direct applicants.
Okay, I want to ask you a question while we're on the recruiter thing.
Yeah.
and sort of lead into a discussion about LinkedIn. Like, is the recruiter view, is that like a real thing in LinkedIn? Like, it says like how recruiters will view you, right? Like, is that, how much of that is like a real thing and how much of that is just sort of like, hey, look at this bell and whistle we put on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's a real thing. So I will say the caveat is the level of account that the recruiter has. So a lot of recruiters that either work for an established agency or an in-house recruiter have access to LinkedIn Recruiter, which is think about it as like the premium Salesforce account. We have visibility into whether or not you're looking. So if you put open to work, um, that's private to your employer, but public to recruiters. So we can see when you're open to work, and we actually do run searches on candidates that are open to work, and we'll often prioritize the candidates that are open to work. We also can see if you list that you're open to relocation. So again, if you're willing to relocate to a different state or city, feel free to you can specifically put what areas you're willing to relocate to. And then we can also see history of when you've applied to jobs at our company, as well as when we've messaged you last.
Okay, that's good to know. So let's talk about LinkedIn, right? I think that's a lot of people's first touch point nowadays in terms of actively looking for a job or presenting themselves professionally to the world. You talked a little bit about how recruiters see, the recruiter view into a profile. What's sort of the difference from a recruiter perspective between like LinkedIn and a resume?
Yeah. So a lot of employers now are accepting LinkedIn as a substitute for a resume if there's enough detail. I emphasize the if there's enough detail. But you can think of it this way. Your LinkedIn profile is visible to the public versus a resume is something that you choose to share selectively and privately with employers that you're engaging with. So you can choose to add as many bullet points or as little bullet points as you'd like on your LinkedIn versus on a resume, details are absolutely required. And I will say that LinkedIn gives you the opportunity to show off your personality a little bit more. For example, the About section, which is considered a bio, is a chance to tell us who you are. So do you have a sense of humor? Do you have interests outside of work? Any achievements that you want to highlight, which are sometimes superfluous information to add to a resume?
Okay, so let's get into the LinkedIn part, right? Like, how
Yeah.
much detail should I include on my LinkedIn page? And is there anything that I should absolutely do yes, do this when doing your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, the detail is up to you. So if you're actively searching, I recommend adding as much detail as possible, especially under your experience section. You can even translate bullets from your resume directly to your LinkedIn. So in the event that recruiters are running a LinkedIn search or look at your LinkedIn before they look at your resume, the information's right there for them. Um, and again, I want to mention the About section in your bio because this is the opportunity to stand out against other applicants by providing a glimpse into your skills or your personality. If you really want to make a recruiter drool, list your superpowers in the About section. For example, right now, one of my clients is looking for a product manager position that is focused on building a personalized content discovery recommendation engine for their product. So I'm looking for very specific type of product manager. And when I go to somebody's LinkedIn profile and I see in their About section that they say their superpowers are recommendation and discovery, I'm already really excited. And all it takes is a quick glance at their experience to confirm that, like, yep, I want to reach out to this person. To answer your second question about what should you absolutely include in your LinkedIn, I strongly recommend prior to even drafting your new LinkedIn profile or adding new information, run a search on LinkedIn for at least 5 other profiles of people in the same role or the same function to benchmark against your own. And obviously the goal isn't to plagiarize what they've written. In fact, please don't. But it gives you some inspiration into the style that people are using and maybe even some talking points that you might want to add yourself. Again, the more insight that you can give me as a recruiter into what you've worked on in your last role, it'll be easier for me to identify if you're a good fit. And also place an emphasis on results in addition to your responsibilities. So if you say that you've owned all social media marketing for Instagram, that's great. But what I really want to know is you owned all social media marketing for Instagram and you increased traffic by 20% during your 8 months in that role.
Yeah. Okay. Really good. That's really because I always kind of ignored the about section, right? I sort of put it in as like, oh, people will just skip over that. But what you're telling me is that actually it can be a useful tool. So for everybody watching,
Absolutely.
really refine that about section. Now we did the
Yeah.
do's. Now, what are the don'ts? What are the absolute red flags for you as a recruiter when you look at somebody's LinkedIn page?
Yep. Keep it professional. So your profile picture should just be you. I know it's tempting to put a family pic or a pic at the zoo, but try to include just you, like just your headshot. And again, keeping it professional means like maybe not choose the picture of you at your friend's bachelor party, or doing a shot at a bar.
Oh,
And
1 second.
hopefully this
I'll be
goes
back.
without saying, but no profanity. And believe it or not, we've seen it all on LinkedIn. The second thing is don't list every single skill under the sun. So let's say that you're a software engineer and you've worked with 10 different programming languages, but you're really an expert on 3. Choose the 3. We also see this a lot with marketing, where marketing folks, like, they're smart. They know the SEO keywords to include, so they'll include every single keyword under the sun to attract a recruiter's attention. But the problem is that when we see every single thing listed on your LinkedIn, we assume that you're a jack of all trades, but perhaps a master of none. And what we really want to know is, what are you a master of? So try to be selective on your LinkedIn and really show us, like, here's what I'm good at. And you know what? If it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. But at least you're being honest up front and you don't waste your time or the interviewer's time.
Okay, that's it. So that's good on LinkedIn, right? That's a great, thank you so much. That's really helpful because that's, everybody watching this probably has a LinkedIn profile. Now let's move from like the general LinkedIn, right, to there's a job that you found that you want to apply for. You go to the website either through LinkedIn or whatever, right? And when you apply for this job, let's talk about sort of cover letters and resumes. I hate cover letters. I really do. I think they are a pain to write. I feel like they're so empty. But do you think if it's optional, should people do that? Should they include a cover letter?
Yeah, I do. It's not always required on job postings. In fact, most of the time it's not required, but I'm a huge proponent of the cover letter. As a recruiter, it's a way to see which candidates stand out, and it also gives me a glimpse into the preparation you've put into applying for this particular role. And also a further explanation as to, like, why my company, and why this role specifically. So if there's an opportunity to include a cover letter, I say, yes, do it.
And how long should the cover letter be?
Yeah. So I think I like to use this analogy that a great cover letter should be like a compelling movie trailer. You're giving the employer and the recruiter a teaser into who you are as an employee. So long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to keep us wanting more. My general rule of thumb is half a page. So a few sentences, first your greeting, and then 2 to 3 sentences expressing why you're interested in the role, and then 2 to 3 sentences why your experience is applicable, and then sign off. A pro tip is to not send a blanket cover letter to 20 different companies. As a recruiter, I'll see right through that and I'll know that you're just applying to any company that has an open role for X position. What really is meaningful to me is a connection. It stands out if a candidate says, like, I've been a fan of your product for 5 years now. I use it every day. That's the why they're interested. And then the experience would be, with my 3 years of experience, as a recruiter, like, I'd love to join your team and, like, hire more people into this great company. I think cover letters are also a great platform to explain why you might be switching industries or roles. So if you are in the middle of an industry switch or a job switch, absolutely include a cover letter. And again, don't make it a novel, but just 2 or 3 sentences explaining, like, hey, I've had 25 years of recruiting experience, and I find that I love working with people. And I love selling things. So I'd like to move into sales. And that's why I'm applying to this account executive role.
Great. Now let's move on to the resume itself, right? You gave me an interesting set. Like, how much time do you spend with a resume, whether you're internally or externally? How much time do you spend with like You get a stack of resumes. How much time do you spend with any given one?
Yeah, the answer might surprise you all. It surprised Chris when I first told him. But I often know if a candidate's a fit after the first 30 seconds of reviewing the resume. Here's the things I look for while scanning. I look for relevant titles. So if the open role, let's say, is a principal product manager, have you been a principal product manager in the past or held an equivalent title? Next would be relevant experience. Have you clearly listed the experience, or have you clearly listed experience on your resume that's listed in the job post? And do you have translatable skills? And then the third thing is strong written communication. Is your resume concise? Is it well formatted? Are there no typos?
Typos are a big thing. I imagine that's the thing that drives me crazy with resumes is just going over and over just to make sure that like I haven't, mistyped
Yeah,
grit as
yeah.
girt.
And writing a resume is often seen as popular as doing the dishes or going to the dentist. Let's be honest, like none of us love writing a resume. But the good news is there are a lot of great tools out there to help you. Even Microsoft Word, like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, they both have templates. If you just do a quick search on YouTube, there's videos to show you how to use Microsoft Word or Google Doc templates to write your resume. There's also really great tools like Canva, Resume Genius, even LinkedIn has a resume builder. So you don't have to start from scratch. You have tools that can help you. And they also help with the formatting I talked about, as well as spell check.
That's
ChatGPT is an amazing inspiration for content. I use ChatGPT now pretty regularly, I would say almost daily, and you can use it to write a resume. You have to play around with the query that you give it, but you could start with, write me a resume for a sales enterprise account executive with 15 years of experience at a SaaS company, and it will give you a great starting point that you could perhaps enter into one of these tools. And then absolutely have a peer or two review the draft of your resume once it's complete, just to make sure that it reads well and is really showcasing you as a candidate.
okay. So a lot of the, people in open water have decades of experience. How far back should a person go with their resume, right? Like I think back, I could go way back, but I don't think anybody is interested in my time as an account coordinator back in, 1994 or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best, how far back should someone go?
The general rule of thumb is to add the most detail to your most recent, like your current role, and then the role before that. But hey, if you're applying to an account coordinator job and you were an account coordinator 20 years ago, it's relevant. So I'd say like use your best judgment. If you are now an engineering leader and your first 10 years of experience were as a copywriter, you can reduce that to just a couple of sentences. Like you just need one line saying copywriter from X year to X year, and then really provide the detailed bullets underneath your engineering. And if you're like me, where all of your experience is in the same field, then like I said, provide the most detail. So we're talking 3 to 5 bullet points for your most recent experience, and then reduce the roles 20 years ago to maybe 1 or 2 bullet points.
Got it. Okay. Now, so I've got my LinkedIn, got my cover letter, I got my resume all sharpened up, and now I am shooting it into now I'm submitting it via careers page, right? So depending on the size of the company, right? Does that just go into a void, a black hole to where, it's never seen? Or give me a sense of, from the recruiter perspective, because you've done both internal and, recruiting agency, like, is that the best, what happens then?
Yeah, it's a tricky one to answer in this market. Unfortunately, I've had too many folks in my personal network have bad experiences where they've applied to a job and never heard back, or they've even gone through the interview process and never heard back. In my opinion, that's unacceptable. And I feel like it's giving recruiting and perhaps hiring managers a bad rep. I'd say like when you have a strong recruiting team, the majority of cases, the answer is every single resume that's submitted through a careers page will be reviewed. And Recruiters should ideally get back to you with either you've been selected for the first interview or you've been rejected. I will say in this market, because there's more competition, you might not always hear back, and it is good to cover your bases, which I think you and I will talk about in a second. I think also a question that we get a lot from candidates is, when I'm submitting my resume to a careers page, does my experience need to be an exact match? And the answer to that is yes and no. Let's start with the yes. Be realistic about the role that you're applying for. For example, if the open role is director of engineering, managing 20 people, and you've been an individual contributor your whole career, never managed anybody, you're likely competing against people that do have management experience, and you're not going to get selected for the first round. Now for the no, everything that lines up, if everything lines up except for years of experience, we always encourage people to apply, because many hiring managers use years of experience as a proxy for translatable skills. And there was a really interesting Harvard Business Review article that stated men tend to apply for a job when they meet 60% of the qualifications, but women only apply if they meet 100% of them, which is why we always encourage hiring managers to de-emphasize years of experience and more emphasize like the skills and the competencies needed in the role. So if everything lines up but years of experience, I say apply anyway.
Okay. Now it seems to go without saying, right, that it's always best if you have somebody at the company that you're interested in to get them, have them shepherd your resume through whatever internal system they might have. Do you have any thoughts on just finding an in, or sort of the power of referrals within a company?
Yeah, the power of in is huge. Network, network, network. That's one thing you can take away from this webinar. I would say get comfortable with networking. My parents trained me at an early age that it's not what you know, but who you know. And that is truly the case when you're job searching. You can have the best experience in the world, but often you're competing against other folks that have equally great experience and know somebody at the company. References mean a lot. What I mean is employee referrals. So when an employee is submitting a candidate, it's often prioritized if they have relevant experience. So my advice would be, for each job that you're applying to, run a LinkedIn search and see if you've worked with anybody at that company. Or potentially somebody that you've met at a networking event, maybe OpenWater, that might be able to get on the phone with you for 15 minutes, learn about your experience, and then submit you as an employee. It's okay to reach out to people that you don't know, but do it selectively and thoughtfully. For example, don't be a creeper. Most folks have basic LinkedIn accounts, which permits you to send 25 messages to people you're not connected with. Be selective with the amount of requests that you send and the amount of messages you send, and be, again, intentional and thoughtful. So I'm writing you because you work at OpenWater. I respect OpenWater. I've wanted to be a part of the OpenWater family for a while now. Would you be willing to jump on the phone for 15 minutes and tell me more about your experience? And then after they say yes and you get them on the phone, you can ask if they're willing to submit you. So not creepy is reaching out to a select number of people with intentionality. Being creepy is sending your resume, a blanket resume, to 50 recruiters on LinkedIn.
I'm going to jump. We got a question in, and I'm going to kind of answer it in a less blunt way. So I've got, this, I'm going back a step, so I apologize really quick, because I don't want to lose this, right? So in creating my resume and getting all of my materials together, I'm older. Is it bad to sort of obfuscate my age in a way? So like not maybe necessarily putting the year I graduated from college, emphasizing the year I graduated from like grad school, or only listing the past 10 years. Is that sort of bait and switch in a recruiter's mind? Or is that sort of like, because when I show up and I've got my gray hair and people are like, oh, you wait, hold on a second. And I understand officially there are all kinds of legal reasons that people can't discriminate, right? But I'm just wondering, just as a general rule, is that bad to sort of not lie, but just sort of not emphasize?
The perception is that there's a stigma with older candidates. The reality is that there isn't. You never will know what we're looking for behind the curtain. So some companies are looking for new grads, like they want folks that have just taken the classes and that are looking for their first job and, frankly, maybe a little bit cheaper. Other companies are looking for experienced candidates. So we're talking maybe the open water crew that has decades of experience, can bring that wisdom, that has a playbook, can come in and make recommendations based off of the company's needs with that experience. Other employers might be looking for diversity. So I say always apply and never assume that just because you have years of experience and age, you'll be discounted. In some cases, the employer might be looking for those years of experience. Another thing that Chris and I talked about offline before this chat is that not all roles are posted. So we always have a handful of roles that for one reason or another, maybe we just truthfully haven't gotten around to posting yet, or the manager is thinking like, I'm going to post this role next quarter, but I might opportunistically talk to candidates as they apply. So even if you feel like you might be overqualified or too experienced for the role that's open, apply, because it could be the case that they keep you in mind for another role that does require more experience.
Okay, now I'm going to get you back on track because I kind of derailed you there a little bit, and I appreciate you riding with me on this. So you've put together your LinkedIn profile, you've added your about page, right? You've removed the picture of you doing shots as your profile photo. You've written your cover letter that's half a page. You've done your bullet pointed list using a template in Google Docs or Microsoft Word to create a resume. You've had your peers review it. You made sure it aligns with the job you're posting for, and you land an interview. What should you do when you land the interview? Because I think people may think like, oh, I know how to interview. I'll show up and then, but I think rules are changed then now, right? Because it's no longer you go in, or it's not just a phoner, it's on Zoom. So what are some modern necessities when you land that first interview?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, first things first, please celebrate the win of landing that interview, especially in this market. It's no easy feat. But as you mentioned, landing the interview is only half the battle. Now you have to stand out against all the other candidates that are also interviewing. Hopefully, if the recruiter or company is doing a great job with candidate experience, you feel like you're the only candidate in the world. And that's how you should feel. But in reality, you're not. Usually the averages for each open role at the final stages, we have anywhere from 2 to sometimes 5 finalists that will interview for a position. So when you're done celebrating the interview, here's a few things that could help you prep and stand out. First, ask the recruiter if there is a recruiter, if not, ask your point of contact at the company, if there's any pointers to help you best prep for the interview. It might be subjects that the interviewers cover, or it might just be personality styles. Recruiters will not always offer this information up front. The really, really prepared recruiters and great candidate experiences that we've seen will set up a prep call with you to run you through what to expect. But I would say the majority don't. So you need to ask for it. And this could be really helpful, not just in learning what subjects they cover, but also interviewer styles. For example, I've been given the heads up like, hey, ex-hiring manager speaks in bullet points. Like they're very succinct and abrupt. So don't take this as it's not going well. And that way you're mentally prepared to expect that. You should also ask about the dress code. So a lot of folks that haven't interviewed in a long time have no idea what to wear. And I would say when in doubt, ask your point of contact, whether that's the hiring manager or the recruiter. I know for a lot of tech companies, it's totally normal to show up in a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, and a suit would feel out of place. Whereas when we're thinking about like a law firm, a VC firm, like we want folks that are more buttoned up and polished. So the default is if you're not sure, ask. I would also say self-awareness counts for a lot. And what I mean by that is a lot of candidates come prepared to show off and talk about their wins, and they're less prepared to talk about what might have gone wrong in past roles. And the reality is that we've all taken stumbles, right? Whether a project didn't go well, whether you've been laid off. And as a recruiter and a hiring manager, we're looking for you to be transparent about that. We care less about the fact that you've been laid off and more about the fact that you're self-aware, that you learned. So what did you learn? And be prepared to talk about that. Like, hey, here's what went wrong. Here's what went wrong in my last position, but like, here's what I took from it. And here's how I've applied these learnings to future roles. If the interview is over video, test your Wi-Fi connection in advance. This is a big one. You might notice that a quarter of my face is missing right now. It's because I tested my Wi-Fi in my home before this presentation. It was unstable, so I came down to our community conference room, and I'm hating the obnoxious background. And then, if possible, eliminate all distractions. So you wouldn't believe the interviews that I've had, that I've heard other interviewers have had, where, you know, there are kids running in the background, or somebody's doing the dishes during the interview, or on a walk where there's lots of static. Make sure that you're in a quiet place with no distractions. And in this work from home environment, where sometimes just inevitably there are last minute distractions, just let the interviewer know. We're all human. So say like, hey, listen, you know, my kids were supposed to be in childcare right now. The nanny's sick. They're in the next room. Everything should be fine. But if they come charging in, just know that you know, I tried to prevent that.
All right.
And then
Yeah.
lastly, but I'd say also most importantly, be graceful about a rejection, and also persistent with company recruiters. You might be surprised by how many silver medalists companies end up hiring. And when I say silver medalists, I mean somebody was really, really close to getting the job, but there was another person that for whatever reason was just a slightly better match. If the person is gracious about the rejection and ideally stays in touch with the recruiter or the manager, it is very common for them to get hired 6 months, a year down the road. I have a handful of personal examples myself, and that's how I met you, Chris. I had applied to a job through MTV Networks when I was living in Los Angeles. I got rejected, but I stayed in touch with the recruiter. In fact, I took her out for coffee. I would shoot her an email every 6 months. So, you know, just keeping myself on her radar, not being obnoxious about it. And 7 months later, she had an opportunity come up in San Francisco. And that's how I ended up working for Viacom.
And we are all better for it because that brought you here. So that's great. Okay, so I want to make sure that we leave time for questions and answers. So if you have a question, please type away in the Q&A button at the bottom there, I believe. Type in your question and submit it. This has all been really great. Thank you, Stephanie, so much. We'll see if some questions come in. And oh, here we go. So how do you keep in touch? This is a really good question. So you kept in touch with that recruiter for MTV, but we have an anonymous attendee who wants to know, how do you keep in touch with the recruiter in that situation without being creepy?
Yeah. So I would say, listen, we've often heard the analogy that interviewing is like dating, where you have chemistry with some people and you don't have chemistry with some people. And when you don't have chemistry, that's okay. And sometimes those are the situations to say like that company or that opportunity might not be the right fit for now. When you do have chemistry with the recruiter, you know, or with the manager, meaning like you've had great conversations, you feel like the rapport is strong, latch onto that. And I would say the appropriate thing to do is a quick follow-up. This is another question that we get often from candidates is, should I send a thank you note? Sure. You know, is it going to get you the job? No. Like if the interviews went well and the company wants to hire you, they're going to hire you if you don't send a thank you note, and vice versa. Like if you don't send a thank you note, they're not going to take away the offer. But a thank you note is a great way for the interviewer and the recruiter just to have your email address, so that let's say you don't get the job, 6 months later, you could piggyback off of it and say like, hey, we met 6 months ago. I really liked you. I really liked the company. Like, I'm just wondering, do you have any openings? And keep it like that. I would say the appropriate form without being too creepy is like check in maybe like once every 6 months, once a year, once a week, or even once a month is too much. And then you have the opposite effect where you're turning the person off.
Okay, we got some questions in and these are all really good. Thank you so much. We have someone's been freelancing for 28 years. Does that look bad when trying to land a full-time job? And if so, what advice do you have to give that to make, mitigate that or the leap into full-time?
Yeah. Um, it depends. So bad, I don't want to use the word bad. So congratulations on your 25 years of freelance. Freelancing is hard. I've been freelancing for 3.5 years, and I will tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. So I think you should be proud of that. There are companies that are looking for folks with in-house experience. That's just a fact. And they may or may not list that in the job description. So for companies where that's a requirement, and sometimes they will say that, you might need to explain a little bit in your cover letter and just say like, hey, I've been freelancing for 28 years. I'm looking to move in-house, and here's why. And that will give me, a recruiter, some context. Another way to transition from freelancing into the in-house world is to maybe, and I know it's not the ideal, take a little bit of a step back. So let's say, you've been freelancing as an art director for the last 28 years, like you might need to step in as a copywriter in your first job and gain that credibility, gain the rapport, show the employers that, oh yeah, like this person can absolutely operate in-house. And we've seen folks promoted super quickly. So it should not stop you from applying for in-house roles. But I will say that you might have to get a little creative with how you present yourself if you want to go in-house.
Great. We've got we've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to get through these. We've got a few more questions in here. One asks, if there's an old picture on my LinkedIn profile, is that bad if I look totally different now? And when I appear on the Zoom, it's the new me? Or do people understand that?
People understand that. Yeah, I don't judge. I don't really care if it was a picture from 20 years ago or a picture from yesterday. As I mentioned earlier, what I care most about is what kind of picture it is. So again, if it's you wearing a feathered boa around your neck, save that for Instagram or Facebook. What I really want to see is just like a somewhat professional, and it does not need to be a headshot, but it could just be like, have a friend take a picture of you standing up against a brick wall or a blank wall, something that just shows me that like you'll represent my company well, and you're professional.
Great. We have one saying that I'm told that as a C-level executive to avoid LinkedIn as a way of looking for something new, since C-level executives should work with headhunters. Is this true or false?
Mm. Yeah. That's a really good question. I'm not dodging your question, but I want to start by saying that yes, a lot of C-level roles aren't posted. They're not posted on LinkedIn. They're not posted on a careers page. Many times it's a discrete search. So it might be replacing somebody that doesn't yet know they're getting replaced, or maybe it's the new role, but the company doesn't yet know that the role is open. Also, there are lots of search firms that are specialized in specific roles. Shameless plug for Growth by Design. We specialize in placing head of talent and head of people. So oftentimes, if a head of talent or head of people candidate is interested in a new role, they'll come to us first and say like, hey, GBD, what you got? And vice versa. But that said, like, there's no shame if you do see an open role posted at the C-level, apply for it, especially if it's a company that you're interested in. And in terms of a LinkedIn page, I am now, as a recruiter, and again, I don't want to speak for all recruiters, but I go to LinkedIn usually before I even read a resume, because I wanted to see, like, are you a person? Like, let me confirm that you're not a bot. Let me like see your communication style again, like see any superpowers you list, and then I will compare your LinkedIn against your resume. So I'll see like, hey, your your LinkedIn shows that you left this company 6 years ago, but your resume still says present. Like, what's going on? And that could translate all the way up to the C-level. I would say like C-level candidates are not exempt from this. So I highly recommend it. What you want to share is up to you. I will say that a lot of C-level execs might keep their responsibilities or experience a little more succinct and maybe just complete their about bio, and then provide more detail to the executive search firm that they're working with.
Awesome.
And you bring up a good point about executive search firms. Again, I plugged GBD for people and talent, but there are firms that specialize in sales leaders. There are firms that place senior product leaders, even CEOs. And we have a list of good ones. So if a Google search or ChatGPT doesn't tell you the right firms to reach out to, just let us know. We can give you a list through OpenWater.
So I got a quick fast follow on that. Does the number of someone's connections or type of connections play a role when you're on LinkedIn? Like you go, wow, that person has 500 connections.
No.
And you could be like, that's great, or that's bad because they just, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
No, it's not about, I could care less about your number of connections. It's more about the content that you provide. And again, like truly just proving that you are a real person. It's,
Hey,
I hate to say it, but in this day of in day and age, like with AI, for better or for worse, like it can be scary. And we do get fake candidates applying to jobs. So we have to be kind of on our heels about that.
any tips on finding fractional roles or work? I've seen fractional seems to be sort of the soup du jour as it is. Like that's sort of the thing that I see a lot more of now. Do you have any tips around that?
Yeah, so there's different types of fractional. It could be that you're a new parent and you want to reduce your hours from 40 hours a week to 20 hours a week. Or in the freelance world, right? You're looking for maybe a handful of different clients. A lot of companies will list them. There are search firms that work with fractional placements. And then the third option is just networking and truly like find 10 companies that interest you, and then find a contact at each of those companies that ideally you know or somebody you know knows, and reach out to them and say like, hey, I really like your company. I'm only available to work 20 hours a week. Like, I don't see anything posted on your website. Do you know of any opportunities not posted that would welcome a fractional employee? So it probably takes a little bit of extra legwork and networking, but there are absolutely opportunities out there.
Got another LinkedIn question here that I think is also interesting and pertinent, which is, does somebody sharing content and opinions on LinkedIn impact sort of how you view them, or does that, that work to position as a thought leader occur as just noise, right? Like, are you looking at sort of the posts that they do?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think that LinkedIn has become, I love it. It's become sort of like a discovery tool, where, we're looking for content that speaks to us. And so a lot of folks to be seen on LinkedIn now are sharing content, like sharing blogs and sharing webinars and videos. Um, I'm not as concerned with how much content you're posting and how frequently, but like what you're posting. So let's go back to the example I shared about the principal product manager that I'm looking for that owns like recommendations and discovery. If I go to their LinkedIn page and I see that they recently wrote a Medium post or LinkedIn post on search and discovery, that will definitely get my attention. If they're just talking about life, or the market, like not as interesting.
Got it. So if it's relevant, then that's helpful. If it's just sort of like just thoughts on, you know, Taylor Swift winning the Grammys or whatever, not so helpful.
I would prioritize quality over quantity.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So the
Good.
quality, relevancy of the content that you're posting versus like how many times you post.
Okay. Now, you talked about ChatGPT and creating resumes, but what about on the other side, that like AI tools or tools that help identify keywords and keep customizing sort of your responses until you get a match? Do you have any thoughts on those kinds of tools?
Yeah, there's so many great tools out there, which is making our lives easier as recruiters, where we're able to do more targeted searches on experience, geographies, like interest levels, etc. Thankfully, at this point, it's not become a replacement for actual people recruiters, but it's a huge aid for us. And I would say, like, as I mentioned before, absolutely showcase your superpowers. So there's a skills section at the bottom of your LinkedIn page where you can put skills that are your superpowers, or even just in your about. LinkedIn searches, when we search for keywords as a recruiter, it will pull up a profile and highlight anywhere that keyword's on the page. So not just the skills section, it also highlights it in your experience as well as your about. But as I mentioned before, don't list every single skill under the sun just to pull up in a recruiter's search. If anything, if you keep pulling up in searches because you're listing every single keyword, will, maybe ultimately end up blocking you. So really just be sure to highlight what you're good at.
Okay. And the last question here before we thank you for your time is, questions are a great way for a candidate to show interest. We're in the interview now, right? And what tips can you share around asking engaging questions? Why asking engaging questions is important, and maybe some do's and don'ts regarding the questions that you do ask as a candidate.
Yeah, great question. Great question about questions. So most of the hiring managers and interviewers that I work with appreciate questions, and some will even ding a candidate if they don't have thoughtful questions to ask for. It's not easy. Again, I do this for a living. I lead interviewer trainings, and as a candidate, I'm horrible at asking questions to the interviewer. It requires some prep. What we do like to hear you ask is thoughtful questions about the product, about longevity in the role, about what will make an impact in the role. What we don't like to hear is, am I a good fit? Like, we can't tell you. We're not going to tell you on the spot if you're a good fit or not. And also when people ask, like, what are you looking for in this role? That tells me you didn't do your homework. Like, you didn't read the job description. You didn't pay attention to our intro call where I talked you through, what we're looking for and the responsibilities. So, anything that feels obvious, don't ask a question just to ask a question, but thoughtful questions go a long way. And I've seen candidates prioritize because they have spent time digging in.
That's great. Stephanie, we are just about at time. Thank you so much. This was helpful. And like I said, we're going to be probably setting up something. I don't want to spill too much here, but there might be, you are going to be involved in Open Water going forward. So members will be able to interact with you in the future in a way that's to be determined, but in a way that is super helpful as this was. Thank you so much for being a part of this. You were great. I want to let everybody know that I'm going to put this in the chat right now. Our next talk is with the CEO of Philanthropy Together. That's Sari Lamaline. She is fantastic, and she's going to talk about how to give back without being a billionaire. It's going to be a great time, just as it was today. That is also free and virtual, so I encourage you to attend. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you everybody for attending. We'll be doing this again over the coming week. Visit OpenWater.group and join the wait list. Find out about the events. Thanks so much, and have a
Chris.
great week,
Thanks for
everybody.
having me. Thanks everybody who attended.